Hello and welcome to this week's lecture for sustainable settlements. The theme this week is going to be site context analysis, and this is going to help you prepare for your first IT session in week 12. What we're going to cover is what we mean by site context, why we carry out a site context analysis, what information and skills you're going to need to carry out your context analysis, and I'm going to signpost you to some resources to help you prepare for your IT session. Apologies for the typo here, it's in week 12, not week 13. So first of all, what do we mean by site context? What we mean is what is already on the site and surrounding the site. So that can be important features and services in the area that are going to influence what you do with your site. And really it's things that you need to take into consideration and work with. So by site context, then we just mean what's already there, not only on the site itself, but surrounding it. And surrounding it can mean very close proximity to the site, but it can also mean an area that people who maybe will live on the site will access, and also the ecological networks that extend beyond the site as far as they need to extend. Site context analysis is a really important stage in the design process. New developments don't just sit in isolation. They should work with, they should enhance what's already in an area. We call this responding to context. So if I ask you how your site is going to respond to context, it means how it's going to actually work with and enhance what is already there and relate to what's already there. It's worth remembering that you don't need to include everything that your residents are going to need on the actual site itself. It's quite a large area, but it's not a city size itself, and your site is an extension of an existing urban area. So quite a lot of the things that your residents may need will already exist in the surrounding area or elsewhere in the city. And one of the jobs that you can do and should be doing is to show how they will link to your site. So those important elements of the site context will be really key in terms of the design of your site. Ecological networks, as you know, extend beyond a small area. In order to function well, things like blue infrastructure, green infrastructure, and biodiversity networks extend quite a long way from site. So it's important to find out as much as you can about what already exists to make sure that you don't interrupt any of those networks, and that any design that you suggest for your site actually enhances those and brings the green infrastructure onto the site itself. Connectivity beyond your site is one of the most important elements of sustainable site design. We want to minimize the need to use an individual car or individual transportation where possible. So that doesn't mean that you obviously won't have road networks, but we want to make it possible for people to travel to the site and from the site in sustainable ways. So thinking about how your site can link up to and enhance the existing transport network is really important, as is thinking about things like pedestrian networks and cycle paths, cycle networks. Researching the site context, getting to know the area, is going to give you a really good understanding of the area that you're working with and what you're already working with. And that's going to make sure that you have a better quality design proposal when you come to the end of your portfolio work. When you look at the key reading for this week, which I'll discuss later, you'll see that site context includes lots of different elements, and far too many really for you to carry out as an introductory task to designing a sustainable settlement. So for the purposes of this assignment, we are asking you to identify, map and analyse 3 existing elements: the existing transport networks, the existing housing and services, and the urban ecology networks. So what is the public transport, the road network, the pedestrian transport, cycle network in the area already? What housing and services exist either on the site, if there are any, or in proximity to the site? And what do you think is important about the existing housing and service networks around the area? And can you identify and assess the quality of the urban ecology networks as well? So those are, again, things like blue infrastructure, green infrastructure, biodiversity. To find this information, we're going to be helping you to work with Digimaps in the IT sessions. You may have used Digimaps already in your first year, but if not, this will be an introduction to that as well. As well as Digimaps, you can also use other platforms and software that will be very familiar to you probably, things like Google Maps. Google Maps provides an excellent range of information about local services, for example, and transport networks. You can also look up the local transport operators, things like bus operators and tram and train. You could contact local wildlife organisations and look on their websites, things like the Wildlife Trust. They'll have information about the local ecology and projects working in the local area that will suggest maybe where that local ecology needs to be enhanced or protected. You can look at local council websites, which will give you good local information in terms of, again, things like environmental services, parks, woodlands, transport networks, and community groups. And then you can also research local community groups and charity networks in the area, which will give you maybe more of a detailed level of understanding of the community needs in the area and what's already existing in terms of social infrastructure. I showed you this slide in the introduction to the module, but this is the kind of thing that we're asking you to produce. This is what a site context analysis looks like. So you can see that it's predominantly visual. The maps in the middle of the sheet really are the things that the text is responding to and talking about. So this work is predominantly map-based, and site context analyses tend to be map-based, but you can use things like cross-sections, which can be really good for showing things like ecological networks and changes in level, topography, that kind of thing. You can hand draw your visuals, or in this case, this is a map that's been exported and then coloured in by hand, but all the text that you include should be typed for clarity. The way that this particular sheet here has been assembled is by exporting maps from Digimaps, colouring them in, annotating them, and adding text boxes. And this has all been assembled in PowerPoint. Again, this is something that we'll show you how to do in your IT sessions, and there'll be supporting videos that you can refer to when the time comes for you to work on yours. So for next week's IT session, I am asking you to read a section of the National Design Guide, and that's it's a very short and succinct and easy to read visual document that's used by practitioners. So it gives you the kind of importance of site context analysis and what the process involves and the elements that you might want to look at. But if you want to explore this subject in more depth, then I also recommend that you have a look at some of the relevant chapters in some of the key texts on the reading list. There are lots of different key texts on the reading list, all of which cover similar themes from slightly different perspectives. So I've shown 3 examples here that are on the reading list that you could go and have a look at. And I'm not asking you to read the whole text, but they will have specific chapters on the key elements that you're going to be looking at: the housing and services, transport and connectivity, and ecological networks. And what those book chapters will help you do is to make judgments about the quality of those existing networks. So the design guide will sort of tell you what and how to carry out a site context analysis, why we do it, what it looks like, and how you do it. But if you want to some help assessing quality of what's already there, then I suggest that at some point you refer to those academic texts on the reading list. So ahead of next week's session, your IT session, all this is also listed in the learning materials for next week. But what I'd like you to do is to read the key text, which is that section from the National Design Guide. Choose a site. So there are 2 sites available, Cambridge and Edinburgh. All the maps and information are available in the assessment folder on Blackboard. Choose which one of those 2 you're going to work on. Make sure that you're registered for Digimaps. And again, there's a video from last week's session showing you how to do that on Blackboard. Make sure you're registered before the first IT session. If you're really struggling to do that, then your IT tutor will help you do that in that session in week 12. Once you've decided which site you're looking at, then there's no harm in starting to explore that now. You can look on Google Maps, you can try having a look on Digimaps, you can explore some of those local area websites and start to get a sense of the area. The earlier you start to do that, the more the work will be spread out and the better quality your final assessment will be. If you have any questions about anything I've covered today, please post them on the module Padlet, or you can ask your IT tutor in your class next week. Thank you.